start recording. We are recording. Welcome to the Afterlife Explorers Show, brought to you by Accentuate the Positive Radio, Soul Traveller Radio. Soul Traveller Radio is a fabulous new internet radio station. It's soultravellerradio.com. Is it .au? .com.au? Anyway, both will find it. And it has all sorts of fabulous conscious music and great conscious shows. One of them is my show, which is Accentuate the Positive, on a Wednesday and a Monday night. And we have been supporting the Afterlife Explorers Conference, which is for the second time in Australia, happening in how many weeks, Kathryn? It's happening in about...
less than 3 weeks, the 29th of January it starts, 29th to 31st.
So the Afterlife Explorers Conference was started by Mick. What's Mick's last name?
Turner.
Mick Turner, who had an NDE. He had a near-death experience. And I guess he looked around Australia and he didn't see too many support groups that were supporting this conversation. And so he started, last year he did his first conference. And then you came on board this year to help him do the second conference. Is that right? And exactly. Mary is one of the speakers, Mary Rodwell, who is the founder of ACERN, which is the Australian, now hang on, ACERN stands for Extraterrestrial Resource Network.
Yeah. It's Close Encounter Resource Network.
Oh, there you go. I got it wrong. All this technical stuff, Close Encounter Resource Network. And Mary has started her life off as a nurse and a midwife and a health counsellor and counselling people. And what happened was she found that some really strange stories were coming out as she was counselling people, and she needed to investigate this, and it opened up that rabbit hole. You went right into that rabbit hole, into all this amazing stuff that we're going to talk about today. Do you want to talk a little bit about how it all started for you, Mary?
Absolutely. I think it's important to understand that, in counselling, when, as you were talking about Mick Turner and having an NDE and not knowing where to go with it, the same thing is with extraterrestrial encounters. And the gentleman that first came to me said, look, I've heard you're open-minded. There are no support groups for this. People just think you're crazy. But this is what's happening. And what was interesting to me, apart from him being obviously he was a grounded, articulate, intelligent man, he knew how it sounded, but him and his whole family were experiencing being taken up on spacecraft, waking up with marks on their body. In fact, the relatives were really terrified to come to the house because they thought it was demons or something like that. So for him, it was, this is my reality. Nobody wants to know. Nobody believes you. And for me, I've heard so many stories when I've done grief and bereavement, hospice counseling, where people have found that, they've been visited by those that have passed on, or they've had an NDE, or they've had a spontaneous past life experience, for example, where they found themselves remembering things from another time, whether it's actually on this planet or another planet. So how is it that we have a problem with that when, that is my problem with society, is that just because you have an experience that isn't 3D, why do we have a problem with the fact that we do? Because we're, if we believe in a soul is multidimensional. So what's the problem? And for me, it wasn't a problem. It was more, I don't know about this and I need to understand more. I need to know whether this is very rare or whether or not it is, in fact, something that's more of a global phenomena. And what I've discovered in 20 years, with 3,000 cases and still going strong, is this is a reality for not just thousands, I believe, but millions of people around the globe. Many of them think it's just them. Many of them think nobody else is having this because they never talk about it because they don't want to be seen as crazy. But in fact, it is as real and as actually common to, I think, us as a species as so many other experiences are. And it's the elephant in the room, though, that nobody wants to talk about.
Yeah. There's a couple of questions, but I'm going to ask you, I had a question from a few people before I started this, who couldn't be on the call. And one of them said, what has extraterrestrials and that sort of encounters got to do with Afterlife Explorers?
Do you know, I get a lot of spiritual groups, spiritualist and psychic development, and a lot of the more new agey saying, well, what's UFOs got to do with spirituality or metaphysics and whatever? And quite honestly, that is a really important one for me to stress. What's this UFO alien lady doing speaking in a spiritualist church? Or because I haven't been invited to spiritualist churches. And I'm saying because the soul isn't always human. Actually, we have all been possibly living as a soul in a different form. And many of my clients will remember being on other star systems in other lifetimes. Remembering having encounters in medieval times, and because I do past life regressions, this is where you see the theme. Many of my clients, some of them children, will talk about past lives on other planets, the fact they've taken on a mission to come to this planet and help with the awakening of consciousness. And they will describe, their real family as being a non-human extraterrestrial. Either, a light being or another humanoid from Pleiades or Arcturus or Andromeda, or a mantid being, and that's their family. That's their origin. So it is actually very relevant. And at least 30% of those that have encounters have had near-death experiences or out-of-body experiences. So it is actually all intertwined, and what somebody in a religious belief system may see as an angel, somebody who's had encounters will perhaps view them as a light being. It's our interpretation and how we love to put things in boxes without realizing it's all consciousness. It's all in the matrix. And the extraterrestrials and the interdimensionals will appear in a form that your belief system will support. But actually, for many of them, somebody's spirit guide may very well be a blue being or, a being from the Pleiades. And they will say, my life guide is this. And so it is actually very much part of our spiritual understanding or our metaphysical understanding. And it is all interlinked. And that is the most important thing I think I need to say with this.
Yeah. From my understanding, because I've got a mob of light beings that I call blissful beings that talked through me. And I had some questions too when I first started seeing Bashar channeling. So Bashar channels an extraterrestrial, a being from another planet. And my question was, why channel an extraterrestrial, like a being from another planet, when you can go directly to source, and channel source, or a non-physical being, not necessarily having an experience in another life experience or physical life experience. What would you say to that?
Well, I think for every individual, every soul that comes to this planet, they will have their way of connecting to their superconscious, higher self, oversoul, God, source, universal consciousness. And for some, we have, or we bring in life guides or spirit guides. For some others, when they connect, they say, I believe it's my higher self or my superconscious. It really doesn't matter as long as that information has an integrity and supports our journey on this planet, or understanding our multidimensional journey on this planet, as well as our 3D world. And so however you interpret it, whether you say, my guide is Jesus, or it's archangels, or it's, a Metatron, or, it's a light being or a Palladian, really and truly, that's just allowing us to link in to those higher sources of spiritual guidance and understanding. And the integrity of it is how it resonates, and we all know, Bashar's a brilliant one. I find the information coming out of Bashar is really brilliant. It fits with what I resonate with, but many, it may be, other sources, channeled sources. And for some, they'll say, I'm connected to Jesus. Why not? It is, a Christ-centered consciousness, a consciousness of love. it really doesn't matter how we interpret it, as long as it makes sense to us. And I don't think there's any right or wrong in how we interpret it. It's just our vehicle and our awareness is how we will interpret the way we're connected to source.
Mm-hmm. And I think, Mary, you've just answered a question that Spy Gadget raised, which was, are our NDEs influenced by our cultural expectations of the afterlife? And so you've just spoken to that, whether it's being taken into the afterlife through a regression session in hypnotherapy using Michael Newton's method, or whether it's an NDE. But there is that cultural influence that you're talking about.
I think it's inevitable that given our belief systems, our backgrounds, our programming and conditioning, that we will see through the lens of that belief system. And I think those enlightened beings that support us and guide us through life that we've chosen as a soul anyway, will appear in the form that we're comfortable with or we trust. And why wouldn't they? We would do the same. We do that with our children. We present ourselves in a way, or we present, other people in a way that they're comfortable with or they feel safe with. And that's what they do. But what I've also found is the more aware we become, the more we understand about the matrix and our non-physical reality, the more they will show themselves in perhaps a different form or a more amazing kind of form when they say, well, now you're ready to see me. I'll let you see me in this form. And often it will end up being just pure light, or it will be you're seeing a blue being that you thought was before, an angel with wings. It really doesn't matter. It's exposing us to understanding the realities of the intelligences in whatever form they are in what we call the dimensions of soul.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Great answer. Actually, I had that experience when I was younger and I wanted to see my spirit guides. Everybody had a spirit guide with a name and a form, a personality. And I didn't. I had a mob with actually no names or personalities. And then someone gave me this guided meditation where you go down a path and you sit at a lake and you invite someone to come. And no one came. And I'm like, why don't I have someone come? And this is exactly what they said to me. They said, oh, really, Karen, we can be any form that you can conjure, because I used to see just points of light, and I still see points of light, different colors, and I'm getting to know what the different colors are. They said, what form would you have us appear in? And I really got it then. I thought, yeah, I can make you any form. You can be any form you want. And it's really up to me what resonates for me. And when I took people through guided meditations and hypnosis, they would see angels, or they would see religious figures, or maybe aliens, or whatever form resonated to them as higher consciousness that had some authority in wisdom for them. So it's really interesting, isn't it?
I love it. I love the fact that it's challenging us to open up our perceptions and to accept that what really is possible in terms of the soul and what the soul can understand and experience, and what we're capable of as souls, and what when I had a young gentleman, a graphic designer actually, and he was exploring he saw himself as an ET, and he said to me, I'm moving something huge from one dimension to another. And he said, it's a planet. And I said, so you're moving a planet from one dimension to another? He said, yes, and we've done it too quickly, and we've messed up the energy, and we've now got to fix it. And he actually did a drawing of this. And I remember thinking, right, Mary, so they can move planets into other dimensions. What do you think of that? To me, it was like another aspect of multidimensional ability, realities that I hadn't been exposed to before. But who says that's possible or impossible? We don't even know what's impossible. We come from a very, we're looking at the world or our realities through the eye of a needle, and we think that we know how it all works. It's ludicrous.
I know. Esther Hicks, which is another mob that's channeled from higher consciousness, channeling Abraham, says it's as easy to manifest a button as it is a castle. And often she says, you're talking to your source, and your source is the energy that creates worlds. And you've just spoken about that. This person, from that non-physical perspective, is creating a planet, a world, and moving it through different dimensions, which is actually what's happening to us right now as a world called planet Earth. With our humanity and our consciousness, we're actually shifting and moving from one dimension to another dimension. And there are a lot of beings that are coming on the planet right now that are helping us do that, because it is a shift in consciousness. This is what these conversations are all about. And you've experienced through your work, Mary, so many of these star beings that are coming in to help us shift our consciousness. Do you want to speak a little bit about that?
What I want to say is, and what I'd like to do at the conference, is not only talk about its reality, that this is happening, has been happening through millennia, and as the gods that have come down who have definitely tinkered with our DNA. And, I will briefly touch on that reality and on the fact that, that there is a physical component to this. Craft do enter our space. Every 6 minutes around the globe, somebody sees a UFO. There are hundreds of thousands of people that are going up on craft, interacting with these beings, and all the rest of that side of things, which I will talk about, which includes, the fact that this ultimately shifts consciousness and shifts them to an understanding of a greater reality. But what I want to also talk about is the fact that we are changing in consciousness as a species, and each generation shows us that. The names of the indigos, crystals, children of light. These new children I'm going to talk about, the star children, the new human. I'm going to talk about children under 10 that talk about their origins, what star system they're from. I'm going to talk about, what abilities they come in with, their awareness of what their job is to help awaken this planet, from healing abilities to telepathic abilities to understanding the nature of reality. The fact that these are children that never watch, talk shows and read books on this, but are aware of who they are and their star origins, and also what they are saying needs to happen on this planet, how they're bringing the knowledge from their education on spaceships, going and being shown how to levitate, being shown a whole range of skills, so that they're bringing those in as well. And the reality of that, and some of these children are labeled as ADHD or Asperger's or certain types of autism or dyslexia, but all they are new programs that are deliberately made, I believe, so that they can't be conditioned into the old, limiting 3D world, which we all know is not the true nature of reality. And so, in other words, the star beings have made it difficult for these kids to be programmed and conditioned as the older generations have been. And that's the reason they look dysfunctional. They're actually showing us a new way. We're the dysfunctional ones because we've been programmed out of our true nature and our true understanding and aspect of what we are, which is multidimensional beings. So I'll be talking about the validity of that and the scientists who actually are confirming this hypothesis.
That message just can't be spooked enough. I just know so many parents that are so beside themselves because their children don't fit in with their education system. They just don't learn the way we're trying to teach our children. And, they're forcing the system to change, which is fabulous. But the poor old parents just see their children as damaged rather than brilliant. They need that shift in perspective. Yeah, it's just... Look, I was listening to a conversation on the net the other day. I've been quite concerned about the pollution problem of our planet. And all these people throw all these documentaries in my face, like Cowspiracy and a whole lot of documentaries that are really saying we've got 50 years left if we keep going the way we're going with what we're doing pollution-wise. So a lot of that's around eating meat because apparently cows are polluting the planet just hugely. Anyway, there's a whole lot of stuff I'm not going to go into. But I was listening to a conversation with a channeled conversation the other day, and he said that the 0 to 5-year-olds that are on the planet right now will be the generation that completely clears that up. So that was interesting. The 0 to 5-year-olds.
Well,
I mean, there are people working on it now, but they're coming in with technology that's completely going to shift the pollution problem that we're seeing.
They've come in to show us how to create a new world. And, you know, the fascinating thing is that they'll be the teachers, not us teaching them. They will be teaching us what we need to do. I mean, I was talking to a 17-year-old who I mentioned in my presentations, who said he's come in as an ecological engineer. He's come in to show how to build environments that are in harmony with the planet.
Yeah.
And they know how to change what's going on here, to manifest, to show us technologies that will clear up all the pollution, all the things that at the moment, I mean, one case comes to mind is a 9-year-old girl in Europe who speaks 3-star languages. And she told me that one of the languages, when she speaks, it heals water. So when she speaks this language at water, it heals water. And what she's really saying is the frequencies of that language shift and reprogram that water to heal it. In the same way, Masaru Emoto has always said that frequencies such as music, prayer, intent actually alter the nature of water. And, you know, he showed evidence of this in terms of what happens to water when these frequencies it's exposed to it and it's reprogrammed. And it you know, these are the abilities that these children have and are bringing to this planet now. So to me, that's the most wonderful and exciting part of our future. And when everybody says, oh, you know, the world's falling apart, well, you know what? It has to first before we can start reprogramming it and getting it into a new way of thinking. And sometimes we have to have this chaos and confusion to allow us to be ready to change the paradigm.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? I think there's an old movie that explores that conversation, that humanity has to be pushed to the brink of disaster before they shift. Like, what's that old movie where it was about an ET? It was a really old movie. It was remade, and he was this big metal ET. Anyway, it was a really old movie that was remade, but they explore that conversation. It's like, why doesn't humanity change? They have to be pushed to the brink of extinction before they actually change their ways. Yeah,
I think it was the War of the Worlds. That was one of them where it was saying, look what you're doing. And they had to prove in War of the Worlds that actually humanity was worth saving.
Yeah. Any questions there, Kathryn?
Yes, I was going to jump in with one. We've had one sitting here from Cheryl, actually, saying, going backwards a little bit to what we were talking about, but that her comment is, angels may not all be supernatural beings from heaven. So I wondered if you had any thoughts about that, Mary. She's saying ETs seem to be able to visit the dimension that we call heaven.
Look, I can only go on what research I have and those that I've worked with and the understanding that resonates with me. I think we have to look at the term heaven. What does heaven mean to you? For me, I think heaven is a way of limiting what we understand of the many dimensions. And there may be many more dimensions than we even understand, different levels of frequency that we even understand. So what does heaven mean to you? I feel that as souls, we've experienced all those dimensions in one form or another as we've grown and we've learned or whatever, until we go back to source or when we've come from source. So where is source? Is that heaven? One little girl, 9-year-old, said she called it Dayland, where the ultra-terrestrial and the angels live and where we all come from, and she calls it Dayland. So for me, heaven is really, I think Jesus actually mentioned that heaven was, he said that it was met, there was where I come from, there are many mansions. Many, to me, I see that as many dimensions. Look, whatever it means to you and how it resonates with you is your truth. And I don't have a problem with that. But for me, heaven is many dimensions, and it's levels of understanding and awareness and frequency in terms of who and what we are as souls. But I can't even encapsulate it more than that.
And interestingly enough, this will put it in a new perspective. When you're in heaven, in that non-physical perspective, this third dimension, perspective, reality is actually another part of heaven, because heaven encompasses the whole. Yeah. So we're in heaven, believe it or not. We're already here. And when you speak to dead people, you know, they say that there's no separation between non-physical and physical. It's just that we can't perceive non-physical because we're limited to these 5 senses. So, but we're already in heaven. Yeah. There's another question here.
Yeah, I might need a little bit more clarity from Monty about this one. He's asking about John Hutchison. I don't know John Hutchison, but he's asking, what does he do to demonstrate human or extra-human powers? Are you familiar with John Hutchison?
I'm sorry, I don't know who this person is.
No, okay. So, Monty, you might have to expand on that a little bit more to help Mary out.
And also from UFO Hub News, I have a case of a woman who had an abduction experience during a near-death experience. Have you heard of this, Mary?
I would need to know more of what she calls the abduction, because there are many different forms of that. Some of them are from what I call are not the extraterrestrial. They are abductions from our military called MyLab, and that's a completely different thing. So I would need to know more of her story before I would make a comment on that, because of that mix of those that are true extraterrestrial ones and those that are human orchestrated ones. And a lot of the public are not aware that we have, if you like, agencies that can emulate or create false abductions as well. So I really would like to know more of the account. She's very welcome to contact me if she wants to talk more about that.
I think maybe they're talking about when this person had a near-death experience, they were maybe hanging out with some alien folk.
Yeah.
There's quite possible that when she had her NDE, that when she got exposed to the other dimensions, and in that are all sorts of beings, both humanoid, extraterrestrial, and interdimensional. So she may very well then have seen that as a contact or encounter abduction, and certainly that would fit.
Okay, thank you. She is saying that that's what she's talking about, so that's great. We've also got a little bit of an explanation about the Hutchison effect. So from Andrew, he's telling us that he was an inventor in Canada who is credited with one of science's most unusual and controversial discoveries. It is described as a highly anomalous electromagnetic effect which causes the jellification of metals, spontaneous levitation of common substances, and other effects. That's quite a mouthful to get out.
Yeah, sounds interesting. Interesting. We'll have to investigate that. Who are we talking to?
We might need Andrew to dial in and tell us a little bit more about it.
Do we want to do that? Well,
Andrew, do you want to dial in?
We'll just keep going with Mary.
Okay.
So, Mary, do you want to tell us some of the experiences some of your clients have had, your ET children or Starseed children?
Well, I will obviously expand on some of this, but what is very interesting to me now is that many of them don't have the fear the adults have. They will call them their friends. Often I've visited my friends and I went up on a spacecraft. They will talk about one 8-year-old explained that he went up with a couple of school friends in his school, and they were in these kinds of cylinders where they couldn't move. And I said, what could you see? He said, I could see blue beings. And this is conscious recall. All the children, it's conscious recall. And I said, so what's going on? Do you know why you're there? And he said, oh yes. He said, that's my yearly medical exam. And then he explained that when he was on the craft with his friends and other children, he said that some of them, I said, were they, what were the other children like? And he said, well, some of them were different. He said, they were not the same as us. And I said, what made them different? He said, they had bigger eyes. So he knew that they weren't human in terms of how he understood his friends. And I said, what were you doing? He said, we were learning about a lot of complex things, you know, and he was mentioning black holes and the nature of the universe and how he was using his brain waves to interact with these other children in creating forms in the air. And I said, so can you tell me some of the things that you were taught? He said, well, it's very complex. And so I said, too complex for me to understand? Yes, he said, it's too complex for you to understand. So I was really put in my place because I was told I wouldn't get it. So, you know, but it was quite normal for him to say, this is what I'm learning and this is how I understand it. And he also talked about going up on the craft some of the time, and he said evaporating into his mantid form, which is like a mantid being, which is like a praying mantis being. And I said, so how does that feel? And he said, well, it feels a bit strange, but it was okay. In other words, his soul on the craft sometimes changes form and goes into another form on the craft for a purpose and then comes back into his human form. So this takes the whole business of, you know, are we just staying in our physical form all the time during this life? Or do we actually, you know, move out of our form? And we certainly know we do in out-of-body experiences. So here is another aspect of them being part of the ETs and in their form at times for a job or a role that they play. So, you know, there's so much more that goes on that people don't understand with encounters.
Yeah. Well, we've got Monty here. He wants to call in with a question. Are you going to behave yourself, Monty? We'll get him on, shall we? See what he's got to say. So is he the one that was talking about?
I have to warn you, I'm a troublemaker. Okay, you didn't know that. No, but I love this topic. I'm doing my 5-mile walk that I do every other day. I try to do it every other day.
He's on his phone. He's listening to this on his phone. Don't you love it?
I'm a mobile person, completely mobile. Don't get distracted by the lovely background.
Did you have a question for Mary?
Oh, sure. The question has to do with, you know, John Hutchison is one of the few people that I've ever seen that was able to demonstrate of all places on YouTube. That's a lovely cat you got there. On YouTube, he's actually showing the whole world, including there's officials in the Army, people from NASA, etc., who got a chance to see John Hutchison levitate, fuse metals. There's a scientific term called transmutation, and it refers to metals being fused with wood and etc. And I'm just curious in terms of, have you guys ever got a chance to actually interact with people that are able to give us ordinary people, a chance to see in one form or another demonstrations of some of these abilities that we hear about a lot?
Certainly, we're starting to, you know, get that kind of material together. In one of my presentations, I show a 20-year-old student where she uses her mind to make something move.
Okay.
So she gave a very simple demonstration of that. But I believe that we will get more of that kind of material as people feel safe enough to come out, because a lot of them are quite worried about the exposure.
Well,
and they're
I agree with you. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, you sound as though you're pretty cluey, Marty. And what I would say is they don't want to be targeted.
Right.
And you know what I'm talking about here, I'm pretty certain.
Yeah, I've written, I've done a lot of writing on such esoteric topics as free energy and such. And you would be amazed how soon as corporate America and government finds a target of a particular type of technology that threatens entire industries, they will make a point to harass and intimidate and possibly do something, very, very dramatic to the person who's at the center of the particular technology that, that threatens the industries because of the amount of money and everything. So it's one of those catch-22 situations when you have someone of advanced intelligence and they're trying to let us know on a level that we all can see and hear and understand. And it's a major problem going forward.
Well, there are the way showers that come in with this technology and they put it out there, and then, let's not put labels on it, but somebody stops them, and then a few more come, and then somebody stops them. But at some point, so many come that you just can't stop them all. And that's really what's happening. And that's like that conversation I was talking about, with the pollution. There are beings that have the technology to clean up our pollution now, but these 0 to 5-year-olds, like all of them will be, on that, like they'll all be involved in it. So it sort of comes in en masse. So, the way showers might, and that's in their soul contract as well. They might come in and say, I'm going to present this new thing. And then the fearful old paradigm ones shut them down. But there is a contract that they have, apparently no death is an accident. Every death is a soul contract that they will, because from your soul's perspective, you know that you're eternal, so you don't ever die. This is just another dimension of heaven.
That's interesting. I was introduced to a new technology that's supposed to revolutionize our monetary system. A lot of you probably already heard of it. It's called Bitcoin. And the inventor, right now, he has to stay anonymous. He has to stay in hiding because our government and governments all around the world are threatened by this individual and what he could do to our financial system. It introduces a lot of controversy. But there's a bunch of individuals who probably would like to come forward and say, look, I have some answers for you guys. But at the same time, once we find one target, then everybody, every skeptic, everybody and their brother-in-law pounces on that person and tries to get them to discredit them or whatever. Well,
Bitcoin is a great example because there are so many people involved in it now. You just can't kill everybody. Have you had, Mary, any of your, star children talk about how we're going to transform the monetary system? Because the corruption in the world seems to be wrapped up with the money system.
Exactly.
Have any of your star children talked about that?
Not specifically, although some of them definitely know about what we call conspiracies in terms of what's wrong with the planet, how they're being dumbed down. They're certainly very aware of what's going on behind the scenes. Many of them, even 9-year-olds, say that we have to be careful what we talk about. We have to be careful that we can't be targeted because they know about us and our frequency. But they also, have talked even about John Kennedy and the reason that he was, assassinated. They've said that there are beings on the moon and it's artificial. So they're aware of all those kinds of things. And they're aware that at the moment that they've got to be very careful that they don't expose themselves too much until things change. And they're very aware that these one 9-year-old told me 2012 to 2017 was crucial in terms of the shift, and there are going to be major things happen.
Well, you
probably
want to ask them
on
about
that?
the Bitcoin. Yeah.
Did they?
There's a lot of different understanding. Other than some of it is about a shift in consciousness, about people waking up.
Right.
Almost like we're separating out into two frequencies, the low frequency people and the high frequency people.
Okay.
And there's going to be choices that we make. And what that means in terms of our realities, I'm not sure. Whether or not this means, as some call it, the new earth. But what does that mean, the new earth? Does it mean a reality that some of us will be in a different dimension and experience, or does it mean something else? Nobody's really quite sure, but it's big.
Well, you may want to ask them this specifically.
Sorry, Monty, I just muted you because the wind was causing a bit of...
Oh, okay. I'm going over into an area where it's quieter now.
Did you have any more questions for Mary? So we might...
Yeah, ask your star children whether or not the model that was set by Satoshi Nakamoto, I think his name is, the actual inventor, whether or not that model can be used to introduce new ideas and new technologies. Because from what I understand, he released this into the wild and then he disappeared. And now that we have this technology, this currency / big blockchain technology, now that we have it, it's almost impossible to release it because it's out there already. I think Karen may have alluded to that point. But I'm gonna drop out and let you guys continue your discussion. And thanks for all the bravery in terms of getting the word out about these things.
Thanks, Monty.
Bye, Monty.
Thank you.
Take care.
Alrighty. Thanks.
Any more questions on the other side, Kathryn?
No, if anyone has a question, we've just had Loz join in and say, hello, Starseed friends. So if you've got a question, Loz, feel free to put it to Mary. I think
so. Mary will be speaking.
4 minutes left.
About 4 minutes left. So Mary will be speaking at the Afterlife Explorers Conference coming up in 3 weeks in Melbourne, in Australia, for any of those people that are in Australia. And she's also going to be doing a workshop. Do you want to talk about your workshop there?
Well, the workshop now is not the traditional one. It just means I'm going to be talking about the star children and going into depth because it's so relevant to parents and grandparents when they're seeing these new generations so different and how to support them and actually what we need to do to support them and to give them the courage to be who they are and to help us change what isn't working on this planet. So I think it is a very important part. My second book is actually all about the new human. And so I'm going to be talking a little bit about that.
Do you want to tell people what your first book's called?
It's called Awakening, How Extraterrestrial Contact Can Transform Your Life. And it's for all of those that think this might be happening to them. And if it is, how do you know? What does it mean? How real is it? All those questions that so many ask when they suspect but are not really sure. And if they do know, how do they manage it? How do they grow with it? And ultimately, how does it change your life?
Fabulous. And the new book will be about the start. The children really excite me. I'm really excited about the new children. They're just very exciting. I'm seeing a lot of them in the circles that I run in. I mean, I wouldn't even call them children, even the young adults, like the 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds. It's just a new world we live in because I've been having this conversation for about 30-odd years. I think I started asking questions when I was 15. Who are we? Where do we come from? What's it all about, Alfie? And, 30 years ago, there were very few people having this conversation, but now I seem to be surrounded by hundreds, thousands of people that are all having a conscious conversation on one level or another. Not too many are about extraterrestrials, but everyone is interested in it. I mean, Hollywood's been perpetuating it for years. I mean, in the 60s, Star Trek, it was amazing. But people are starting to see that it's more reality than it is imagination or Hollywood's illusion. You said to me the other day on the phone, Mary, and I got goosebumps, that E.T., the movie E.T., was based on a true story.
Yes, and so was Close Encounters of the Third Kind. They were given the scripts because of the fact that they were based on certain events. And that's why they trigger so many people when people watch them. And you'll be amazed at how many people have said, I saw Close Encounters and it gave me goosebumps. And
Absolutely.
It really, really got to me. And that's because it did happen.
Yeah. Especially that bit where the lights are singing, on the space.
Yeah.
That was, I don't know, I think I was a kid when I watched that, but that was really like resonating with me when I saw that. Yeah, it was fabulous. Yeah. Well, I think we might wrap it up. We've been going for about 45 minutes. Have you got anything else you'd like to add, Kathryn?
No, I'd just like to thank everyone for their input, and especially to Mary to say a big thank you. Mary has stepped in last minute and come into the conference, and we're very, very excited to have her. And I know that a lot of people are excited to come along and listen to her 2 presentations. So thank you, Mary.
It's a pleasure. And I'm really looking forward to meeting you and meeting everyone else there. And one of my important things I want to say is I've come to meet the audience. I've come, if you've got questions or if this is relevant to you, I hope to make myself available to as many of you as possible. So if you've got anything you want to share with me, that's why I'm there.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Fantastic.
Yeah, people will love that.
Well, it's been a great conversation, girls. So Mary, obviously we know, is the founder of ACERN, and she is all over the internet. If you want to Google Mary or just go to YouTube and put in her name, Mary Rodwell, you'll see amazing presentations there. Mary has talked with so many people. I was watching another one of your presentations last night, Mary. I think it was in Denmark. You were in Denmark at a conference. What conference was that?
Well, actually, it was the Exopolitics conference, and I did 4 countries in 4 weeks last year, and the first one was Copenhagen, then it was in Norway, then it was Sweden, then it was the UK, and yes, it's what's fantastic is that so many people are resonating to that information now, and my job is to just get it out there, and that's why I do it. And the traveling is a killer, but it's worth it for the wonderful people that I meet.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And Kathryn is a LBL past life regressionist, or a life between life regressionist, who works here in Sydney and the co-founder of the Afterlife Explorers Conference. So she hasn't put herself on as a speaker this year, Mary. Can you believe it? She's got amazing things to say. She's going to speak next year, though, along with me. I'll be speaking next year too. The conference will be in Brisbane next year. So you're going to come along to that too, Mary?
I might be very tempted.
Because you're up there in Brisbane, so it's not too far.
I am. I'm north of Brisbane. I'm an hour's flight away from Brisbane, so I'm central Queensland.
Oh, right. You're way up north. You're really far up north.
Yeah.
Oh, and so your host today, me, has been KAren Swain. I am a teacher of deliberate creation, and I teach through my mob, Blissful Beings. So they're a council of light that talk about how we create our reality, so how to clean up your thoughts. Because the thing about all this stuff, when you start going down that rabbit hole and experiencing higher consciousness, and manifestation becomes quicker. So you really have to clean up your thoughts if you want to have an easy life, because criticism and judgment and any negative thought hurts so much more when you become conscious than it does when you're, pretty unconscious. So we've lost Kathryn. I think she's gone. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. Thanks, Mary.
Yeah, you're most welcome.
And if you want to find out more about Mary, go to her website, which is ACERN. It's ACERN.com.au, and the Afterlife Explorers Conference.com.au. Also, Accentuate the Positive. I've interviewed thousands of amazing thought leaders and change makers. Go to my website, KarenSwain.com, and you'll see all the people there. Well, not all of them, but some of the people there that I've interviewed, or you can have a session there as well and talk to my guides, Blissful Beings. Thanks, girls.
Take care.
Thanks, everyone, for watching. Again. Bye for now.
Thank you. Bye.